Today, we will be working with this example. I started working in audio using Ableton Live like maybe 15 years ago, and I'm trying to figure out how to work faster in MIDI inside of Reaper. So I will be trying out new things, trying to find my own workflow within Reaper, as everyone should. And I will be sharing it with you in several videos so you can learn how to take advantage of MIDI for your own music making. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and let's try and figure out how effective is MIDI inside of Reaper. So usually when I'm making a brand new session of anything, I can either use the track templates that I have made videos on that, and I have this XO multi-out 18 channels. That's already a track template that includes the plugin XO by Excellent Audio, and it's been routed through its multiple output to different tracks with different sum channels by Toucan, so I can easily fit and handle things around. But what if you don't have that track template yet? What you can do is, if you're making music using some instruments in the box, first you need to identify which instruments you have that have a multi-out. So for example, XO by Excellent Audio, it shows up as a single stereo, but I know that inside of it, in the edit section, I can go into the routing section and output to bus 1 through 8 and the master out. This changes my pin settings, the pin connector, so I can route every single sample through every single one of these buses right here, even though it doesn't show up right here. It doesn't show up because I rather use the AU plugin extensions. So what I could do is go into the FX browser, right-click all plugins, duplicate plugins of different types, first priority, and then go into VST3 first. And now when I look for XOXLN, I will see that it has 18 outs. So for example, Arturia plugins are stereo out, most of them. But for example, Search XT, which I have made a video of, has 6 channel out. You have 2 layers of the same plugin. Even some audio plugins have 12 channels out. So you have to identify which plugins could have that, or just right click them and figure out if you can do this. And the fastest way to build a multi-out out of a single plugin, you have to hit this FX chain so it shows up the plugin like this. Once you have it right here, you can right click and you will have different options than you would if you only right click here. As you can see, the menus are different. You can edit the menus and you can make this show up there and back and forth. But if you can't see it, it's because you're not looking at the FX chain. So from here, you can build a multi-channel routing for output of selected effects, or build 60 channels of MIDI routing to this track. That way, if you use the bottom one, you have one single track that has a single MIDI note that will trigger each of the channels inside this drum plugin, and you can bring the audio out using the multi-routing for output of selected effects. So let's do it like so. And it asks how many channels do I want, and I can see that it's 1 through 18 because every single bus is stereo. I click OK, and now I have all of these channels. What will happen is that these first 2 are usually the main output of the plugin itself. So for example, the main output has this master transformer crunch drive into it, and a soft clipping option and a filter of some sort. So I can handle this with the FX, and everything will be routed into this first one that's going to be master. So if I solo this one, if I only click bus 1, I only have this, and so on and so on and so on. And you can see that this main track now has 18 meters to it. You can open up the routing for track 1 and you can see that now it's a 20 channel track because you have the main out and 18 channels for it. And that's the fastest way to make any multi-out plugin, or figuring out if the plugin you're using has a multi-out. If I use the build 16 channels of MIDI routing to this track, it's going to build another 16 channels where everything is already being sent through MIDI towards this one, and now it's bringing out the audio into this one. So if that fits your workflow, like, take advantage of any of those. In this version of the session, where I have a little bit more advanced version of it, I only have a couple of plugins here and there, like a choke tape model, because most virtual instruments will be clipping most of the time. As you can see, whenever I hit play here, one of these 18 tracks will be clipping, will be going above 0. And I can see that it's the snare or the clap. So right here in the snare, that's why I have it like really controlled with the fader, and I'm receiving it and first processing it with some heavy tape compression. And I made only a folder where everything is being routed. That way I can handle all of my drums balance using one single fader, because I don't want to be selecting all of these faders to do one thing or another. Here I have the master effect, and I used one reverb for this. I highly suggest that you use some reverbs that match when you're making drums inside of a virtual scenario, completely virtual scenario. So for this one, I'm using Eventide's Black Hole, and I'm using it on the clap, the percussion, and the perks effects. If I take this out of the equation, I'm not using the effects of the plugin, because I'd rather have something a lot nicer that sounds a bit more expensive to my taste. So I'm going to take this one out and listen to the drums without it. Now I'm going to turn on the Black Hole. It definitely adds something to it. Now, I have another suggestion. Like, my whole mind is always thinking about how to create contrast and how to make things feel like they actually are what I think they are. So you could have a version of the Black Hole that's completely stereo, and you can have a version of the Black Hole that is completely mono. I will be using this control of the width of the channel. Should be using maybe a mono reverb, but for this example, this should work good enough. I will be using pretty much the same, more or less the same idea of the space. I'm just going to make it shorter, and I'm going to give it a little bit more of pre-delay. And I'm going to send the snare into it. So now if I listen the snare with the reverb, probably even shorter. Like so. So the same algorithm is going to give me some cohesion to the sound of it, because I'm using the same reverb in two different ways. So now I have a much more dynamic space from sampled drums. I think that sounds wider already. So for your drum making, try to have like a couple of details inside your whole drum main bus routing channels. Something that I used to do a lot on Ableton Live, we have something that's called the simpler and the sampler, and they are only like what the name sounds. They are simplers. So they have a nice function to it that you can randomize the panning in a certain percentage, but I usually substitute that way in Reaper using the transient-driven auto-pan transmitter. You have the receiver and the transmitter. Usually I only use the transmitter. I have this as a default setting. It works great. take a screenshot of it, like set it up, and I think it adds just enough movement without it being way too much movement. Remember that so you can actually compare panning, you need something right in the middle so you can listen how things move around the center. So I'm going to do a couple of bars with it on and a couple of bars with it off. I think that adds some nice movement to it without it being way too much. You could even send a little bit of this into the stereo black hole version. That way I have some extra movement to it. And I always try to mix into my reverbs. So that's the overall idea for working with drums. A couple of things that people, when they are making some instrumentals or some beats, are trying to do a lot is use sidechain for triggering and giving this pumping effect that could be a little bit that sometimes can be way too much, but sometimes can be just enough. So I also have a track template for it. So what I do is I have this as a track template. I have a sidechain ghost name. If I go into my add track from template, you will see that I have ghost sidechain, you know what I mean. I insert it and it's only this channel with a full media item that has MIDI notes, usually 4 on the floor. And the other thing is that it also has a Resampling, because what you need when you're trying to do this as a merely just as a control kind of thing, like really tight, you need a really short sound with very short decay. So I only import a clavi that I have in my sample libraries, and it's already set up not to go into the stereo or the master channel. So as you can see, the master send channel from this track is already off, and I only drag it to the channel that I want to sidechain to. So this one without the sidechain is only my harmony path. And the side ghost is going to be playing along with my kick drum. But if I trigger it with my kick drum, the problem or the risk of it is that the kick drum, it has a longer decay most of the times. And since it has a longer decay most of the times, the timing of the compressor will have a little bit of an issue trying to figure out when to stop compressing the path. So if I only set it up like this, the timing will be strange and kind of off. So I'm going to put the kick drum as a reference because we won't be listening to the ghost channel, and it's going into the auxiliary inputs. Remember that if you just drag into the plugin, it's going to create automatically a send into 3 and 4. That's the sidechain input of the plugin. So now it sounds like this. Let me really exaggerate the feeling of it. So I think I don't need something so aggressive. I'm going to play a little bit more with the ratio. Besides, having the sidechain apart with different MIDI notes gives me the freedom to select the timing where I actually want it to duck, because it's not the same as every single hit of the kick drum. I just want some really heavy rhythmic points of it to drop. And I added this small equation of the mid-side encoder. I already uploaded a video on how to make any plugin mid-side. I'll leave it linked to the description if you want to check it out. So this way I'm only docking the mid channel. And if you do it just well enough, it's not going to sound bad, like with really strong phase issues. So you can get away with a couple of tricks like that. 2 more examples of what you can try and play around if you're trying to do some instrumentals or beats using virtual instruments. Since I was recording the bass and the harmony and the melody, I will be uploading a video on different recording styles as well, so be sure to hit like, subscribe, activate the notification bell, and everything that people on YouTube say. The usual way of working with this is just recording the input and the MIDI of this, and this is what will happen. Now we have takes. This is the usual way to work on Reaper using takes, but I have to have the record input audio or MIDI instead of having the MIDI overdub or replace. There are 3 different ways of recording just the MIDI. I will be making a much more in-depth video of this because it's something that I've been trying to figure out, and how to select takes, delete takes, some actions to have at hand that are always useful. One advantage of dealing with takes is that sometimes you can do several runs or several passes on the same 2 bars, and you can just select what you like the most of a different version. You can just flip between takes. You can just look for the best even bar or even subdivision that you like the most, because sometimes I try to make a fill at the end of the phrase and I didn't like it all of the times. So you can just cut here and start nitpicking which part of the take you want more, and you can make a great comp using just take selection. Maybe you want to add some virtual instruments to your production or your music making. So when I was recording this, you have to right-click the arm button and you have to activate on the Record MIDI Overdub Replace. You have to activate overdub if you just want to keep on recording without it replacing and going into new takes. You can start recording and overdubbing ideas, but they will be recorded one on top of the other and they will all be playing at the same time. So this is what will happen. This could be useful if you're trying to lay out drums, so you're doing the kick, the snare, then the hi-hat, and so on. In case of a melody, this might not be so useful, or maybe for chords it won't be as useful. So what you want to have here is the MIDI replace, and now I hit record again. And now they are all simply overwritten one after the other. Probably the last idea that I can show you in this video is I really like resampling stuff during my sessions. That's a heavy Ableton Live workflow. So we all know about different tricks dealing with resampling reverbs and making these risers that grow into the next section or that announce a certain effect or a certain hit within our arrangement. For example, this one, I resampled it and turned it into this. And now it brings a different life to the whole drum loop. So this is interesting because what you can do is once you have your main drums that you want routed into your reverb, you can just time select a portion of the arrangement. And I'm using the second pass render this is really important, second pass render, because what this does is that if it's going to be a really small piece, it's going to add the tail at the beginning of the loop so it doesn't cut off and it doesn't feel like it starts over and over. It actually feels like an endless loop to it. So I have these two actions set up right here, the render stereo and the render mono. They are these second pass render select area of tracks to mono stem tracks and mute originals, and stereo track to stereo stem tracks and mute originals. I will leave those actions in the description below. I don't like using the post fader one because I'm using my faders as a way of monitoring better. I rather have the full volume, the full gain of the clip, and then handle it on another track. So what I did is I only selected the black hole channel. I dragged this is actually a 4-bar loop, so I only drag it like such. And since I'm using the second pass, whenever I render this, it's going to create this other channel right here. And now I have this one. And now I have this one. I will unmute my original black hole channel. And the way to get here is I only cut what I didn't need. I want the same point where the hit of the percussion effects is. So I leave a marker for myself so I know where it should go or where it should end. And from here I'm using Command E to cut at 0 crossing. I disable my grid. I hit R so it reverses the sample. I drag it all the way really close to the marker, and I'm going to leave the big impact of the highest frequencies right after the marker, and I'm going to fade this in. That way all of the sustain is going to build up into the transients. You know what I mean? I'm going to use this fader as well, this crossfade as well, and I'm going to use one final action that I hold Option on my keyboard or Alt, and I just drag it in time for a certain amount according to my own arrangement or my own view or how long it should be. And I'm going to fiddle around also with the project time, shift time stretch modes. I played around with them a lot. I'm going to probably also upload a video on the things that I found out. I find there are some heavy differences that you can play around with. And this one I'm using the transient smooth. Hit apply, and you can even try pitching down the clip itself, like 12 semitones. That also works. And now this sample sounds like this. If I have everything on default without lowering the pitch and I only stretch it, it sounds like this. And it has this grain to it that tells us a lot about the handling of the time. It might be something that you want, it might be something you don't want. And this is the other version. Like, just have fun with it. So with the new reversed reverb into this hit is going to sound like this. And one extra thing that I thought is that not everything stereo is stereo. So what if I turn this take into mono? You can look for this action as set take channel to mono down mix. You can also find this one in item settings, take channel mono down mix, and I have a shortcut for it. The next video will be on how I've been setting up the whole MIDI editor piano roll to my taste, because it's not fast enough for me, not yet. So I've been fiddling around a lot with the options and fiddling around with the MIDI, with the piano toolbar, with the piano roll toolbar. So I will have I will have many videos on this and how to work faster with it. Thanks for watching this video straight from Mexico City. My name is Juanchis, and thanks for listening.